And Suzanne Evans from UKIP.
Hello, it's great to be here. I'm very proud and privileged indeed to be representing UKIP from my hometown here in Shrewsbury. Particularly delighted to be coming to this Chamber of Commerce event because I've always been self-employed and run my own businesses myself. And one of the things I do when I'm not doing politics is work with the long-term unemployed to help them get back into work, and in particular to set up their own businesses. I've also founded a national patient charity. So you might guess from all that that spare time is something that I dream of at the moment. I wonder if I'll ever have it again. But when I do get the chance, I love to cook and entertain, so play your cards right now, I might ask you around for dinner.
Good evening. I just wondered what the panel's view was on the budget today and what impact that they think that might have on businesses and Shrewsbury.
I think it's not going to have much effect on businesses in Shrewsbury at all. I think overall the budget was fairly neutral. There's a tradition, isn't there, that before an election the Chancellor does a great big budget giveaway. And I'm very pleased that George Osborne certainly didn't do that. I think his housekeeping has been quite prudent. But Daniel talked about getting the economy back on track. Let's not forget that the national debt now has doubled since the coalition took power in 2010. It took Labour 13 years to double the national debt. The Conservative-led coalition has done it in 5. So we still have to be very prudent indeed. I would have liked to have seen a lot more for businesses. We're now talking about, George Osborne talked he was going to raise another £13 billion from selling off some of the banks that we, the members of the public, bailed out and saved. And whilst again I think it's good he did put that money into paying down the national debt and not just a giveaway, an electioneering giveaway, I would have liked to have seen some of that money going into helping small business startups who are finding it increasingly difficult to get funding. I think we need to put more responsibility, particularly on those publicly owned banks, to now give back to the people of Britain, and one of the ways they could do that is by putting more money into startup investment. Shrewsbury, again, I think one of the things that UKIP wants to do is to roll back that 20% VAT levy that was put on listed buildings, of which we have so many in this beautiful town, and so many of which we have people running businesses from them as well, and that has put the cost of repairing our heritage up considerably. I would have liked to have seen some clawback there on VAT for listed buildings. And finally, I'd like to have seen the personal allowance go up even further. I think it's iniquitous that anyone on minimum wage should pay any tax at all. I really don't think if it's the minimum that people are said to be able to survive on, you shouldn't pay tax on that amount. And again, UKIP would take everyone on minimum wage out of tax and raise the personal allowance to £13,000. It's a shame that George Osborne didn't take the same opportunity today.
Okay, I'll take another question from Peter Bettis. Peter Bettis, if you could make yourself known, and we'll have a microphone to you in a moment.
Peter Bettis, I'm President of the Shrewsbury Business Chamber. My question is really directed to a bit more information about the business rates, the money that businesses have to pay to government. All their internal costs they can control, but government costs they have no control over at all. I'm asking really the party what they think.
Okay, Suzanne Evans, UKIP.
Thank you. Can I first of all just refer to the Green Party's land value tax idea? I didn't know this, and I'm absolutely astonished to hear it. I dread to think what that might do to small family farms in Shropshire, who after all are businesses. I find that very worrying. As far as business rates are concerned, to go back to Peter's original question, I have a bit of an advantage here, because as well as standing for Parliament in Shrewsbury and Atcham, I'm also Deputy Chairman of UKIP, and I have responsibility for writing the party's manifesto. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to give you a bit of an exclusive here. And I will tell you that it's UKIP's intention to cut business rates by 5%, so I hope that will help.
And how soon after the election of a UKIP government would that happen?
I would think that would happen very soon. I have to say, I might be up to the budget today. I'll have to go back and read you the sums, but I'm pretty certain that will still stand at least at 5%.
Okay, another question. Kirsten Henley, please. Kirsten Henley, over here.
The Sunday Times recently voted Shrewsbury as one of the top 30 places to
Sorry,
live.
can I just ask you to say your name and where you're from?
Sorry, Jim. Kirsten Henley, Shrewsbury Business Improvement District. The Sunday Times recently voted Shrewsbury as one of the top 30 places to live. And part of the ranking of this is the appeal of our town centre, its originality, its community focus and its beauty. How will Shrewsbury Town Centre benefit from the candidate's strategy to support action on promotion, enhancement and prosperity for our local centre for the benefit of residents, businesses and service providers?
Okay, Suzanne Evans, you get policy for the centre of Shrewsbury.
Thank you for your question, Kirsten. I'm a great fan of Business Improvement District. The initiative is fantastic. You know, this idea that you take a certain percentage from the businesses in the town that are the most profitable and put them back into the wider community, I think is a fantastic initiative from a community perspective, and also because it just gives you some extra flexibility and some extra money to put into beautifying the town. So I'm delighted when I heard that was coming on stream, and I very much hope I can get involved in it and very much look forward to it. As far as promotion is concerned, well, it's in my blood. I started out, my first career was as a journalist, and then after 10 years doing that, I moved and set up my own PR and marketing consultancy. So I think I'm a natural, passionate advocate, and loving this town as much as I do, I hope I would be a good ambassador for Shrewsbury, and that would certainly be the thing I think that I would feel most proud of were I to become the MP for Shrewsbury, and I very much look forward to getting involved. In terms of a few practicalities, one thing I'd really like the council to look at is offering 30 minutes free parking in the town centre and in shopping parades on the outskirts of the town. I think that would be really beneficial, and that's been proven to sort of get business in and get people away from the out-of-town supermarkets and back into the town centres. And also, as Laura's already talked about, tourism is a massive industry for Shrewsbury. This is such a fantastic place to visit. The shopping is wonderful, the arts are wonderful, the theatre, and actually only just short of 100,000 people from within Britain visit Shrewsbury every year. And I think there's more scope there for getting people in from our own country as well as from abroad as well. I think that £28 million we get from the UK tourist market is something that could definitely go up, and I'd be looking to promote that.
Okay. Any more thoughts on a strategy for promoting the centre of Shrewsbury? And gentleman at the front, please. Wait for him.
Gordon Stegg, based in Shrewsbury. The LC keeps saying that Shrewsbury is a beautiful place, but the bus station and the toilets are a disgrace. Yes. I go up to Huddersfield, that's not a tourist area, Huddersfield, and the bus station and the amenities there for cafes are a lot better. Yes. Shrewsbury is a disgrace, and it ought to be put right.
Okay, can we just go back to Gordon who asked this question? Gordon, would you pay higher council tax if the bus station were nicer?
No.
Okay,
don't forget.
That I think kind of concludes his answer on that. Okay, just deeply unscientific survey. Would anyone here pay a higher council tax for better services? Okay, Suzanne Evans, you can. Gordon's question about the bus station.
Yes, Gordon's absolutely right. It is not the prettiest part of Shrewsbury, and it would certainly benefit, I think, from tidying up and having some investment. I recently caught a coach down to London, and I thought I'd missed it because I was there and there wasn't anyone around, and I thought, but of course there was no way of knowing whether the coach had gone or not because there's no signage whatsoever. So I was desperately trying to phone, desperately trying to find out what was happening on my phone, and eventually it was late and it was stuck in Birmingham, so I breathed a sigh of relief, but it would have been nice to have known without having to go to that effort. The thing that shocks me most, I think, is the expense of bus services in Shrewsbury. I'm lucky, I can afford to run a car. If you can't afford to run a car, I think it must be immensely difficult. It costs less to get a bus journey in London than it does in Shrewsbury. In fact, in Shrewsbury it costs nearly twice as much as it does in London. That cannot be right, and there has to be something done about this. I think rural bus services are a lifeline. We need to invest in them, not cut them, and that's not just about raising council tax, it's about the bus companies investing as well, and I think that should be a priority, and I'd certainly make it one.
Okay, let's move on to another question. Edward Higginbottom, please. Edward Higginbottom there.
Edward Higginbottom, retired. Will the proposed HS2 bring any benefits to Shropshire, or will it merely attract businesses to move away to be closer to the line?
Will the proposed HS2 rail bring any benefit to Shropshire? Will it merely attract businesses to move away to be closer to it? Okay, Suzanne Evans, you're still writing the UKIP manifesto, but the last we heard, HS2 would not be included in it. You're opposed to it.
UKIP has a very clear policy on HS2, and that's that we would scrap it. It's going to cost 70 billion. It started off at 35 billion. It's gone up to 40, then 50, 60. The latest estimates is 70. And that's not just the cost. It's actually going to be putting an extra £4 billion every year on our national debt as well. And Daniel, if the Conservative government or the Labour government, Laura, whoever it is after the general election scrapped HS2, we could electrify the Shrewsbury line, we could have those 4 services from London to Shrewsbury every day and invest far more money in the existing rail network rather than just allowing a few wealthy businessmen and women to get to Leeds a little bit earlier.
Would that decision harm Shropshire businesses? Given that the question was about whether HS2 would benefit Shropshire businesses, would a decision to scrap HS2 harm businesses in Shropshire?
No, I don't think it will. I think Shrewsbury businesses are good, Shropshire businesses are good, they stand and fall on their own merit, and as I say, I think this will just be a fast track between London and Leeds, and the only people that will benefit and business will benefit are those in London and Leeds.
Let's take another question from Charles Howell. We've got a question about the defence industry. Charles Howell.
Charles Howell from Cooper Green Books and a member of the Business Chamber Executive. I have to say my firm has little to do with the defence industry, but the question I was asking, I think I said guns or butter. Should defence expenditure be brought back to the 2% that apparently was promised by this government, or should the money not be spent and spent on welfare or other issues?
Okay, let's start with Suzanne Evans speaking.
I don't think it's neither or, Charles. I think we can afford to invest in welfare, and I think we can bring that NATO that spending back to 2% in order to fulfil the terms of our membership of NATO, and that is what UKIP will do. We are not living in very stable times, unfortunately. The world is not a safer place, and I think it's disgraceful that actually defence spending has been cut back as much as it has. And worse still, there have been cuts too to the equipment that our troops have. So we would reinvest, and we would also bring troop numbers back up to 2010 levels over the course of the Parliament. We'd also be spending an extra £1 billion a year on setting up a Veterans Administration to look after our brave heroes who've been injured, and I think that's something that I hope we would all agree with on this panel here. So you asked us, there's a second part to your question as well, which was just escaped me now. Welfare. Let's come back to it. Welfare. Yeah, it's like I said, it's not an either or. UKIP's policies are very clear. We want to leave the European Union. Now, if we did that, we would save £10 billion a year. We also think the foreign aid budget should be cut. At the moment, that is pegged to 0.7% of GNI. That's massively more than America pays. They only pay out 0.19% of GNI. So we'd take that back. That would save another 11 billion. If we re-looked at the Barnett formula, where people in Scotland get paid £1,600 more per head than people in England at the moment, that would save between another 3 and 8 billion. The fact is, there is no shortage of money in this country. It's just going to the wrong places. And UKIP would put it back in defence, and we'd also put it into welfare.
I had a question on the rural economy. How will each of the candidates' party policies help the rural economy in Shropshire?
Okay. Suzanne Evans, UKIP Rural Economy.
Thank you. Well, I really do believe that UKIP is the party of the countryside, and I actually think it's the only party in Britain today, the main party, that is standing up for the countryside, actually. I think the Conservatives have allowed far too many of our green fields, our prime agricultural land, to be concreted over for housing developments to start with, and I think that's a massive issue in Shrewsbury, and one I feel very strongly about. To talk about farming specifically, of course, at the moment, farming is completely controlled by the European Union. So Daniel has no influence whatsoever over any rules or regulations that happen in farming. And leaving the European Union, of course, we could actually start to make a real difference for farmers. At the moment, for every £2 of taxpayers' money that goes to the European Union specifically to finance the common agricultural policy, only £1 comes back to our farmers. So out of the EU, we would have a lot more money to give them, and we would certainly not stop subsidies. But actually, in this sense, I agree with Emma. What we want to do is divert money away from the very wealthy, large, intensive farms and put more money into these smaller family farms, the organic, the less intensively farmed as well, which I think is what the consumer wants. As far as dairy farmers in particular go, what we like to do is increase the remit of the Competition Commission. At the moment, they can only look at issues such as pricing and competition. We want to expand that remit so they look at fair practice as well, because that's been a major problem in dairy, and fair practice has got to be, I think, taken into greater consideration. The other important thing, I think, when it comes to farming is it's all linked up intrinsically with food labelling. I try and buy British, and I try and buy meat as well that hasn't been not stunned before slaughter. That's my particular choice. I also choose to buy free range. Again, food labelling at the moment is completely controlled by the European Union, so there's not a lot that we can do about it. And what I'd like to see is us out of the European Union in control of food labelling. I think every piece of food that we have should say where the animal was reared or where the crops were grown. It should show when it comes to animal welfare, how they were transported, how they were reared. I think it should show whether they were transported anywhere, and actually UKIP would end the transport of live animals for slaughter, which means you have even horses cooped up in cages for hours on end. It's cruel and inhumane, and the labelling would show how they were slaughtered as well. So it would give the consumer much more choice and make people like me and you much able to choose, much greater choice over who we buy from and where we buy and what we buy. And I think that's half the battle actually in supporting farming in the rural economy.
On the subject of things that are perceived as cruel and inhumane, on the subject of things that are perceived as cruel and inhumane, what's going to be the UKIP's manifesto about the fox hunting ban?
We have no plans to repeal the fox hunting ban. We're great believers in direct democracy. So in theory, if 5% of, we would have to do this on a county by county basis. No, it's 20%, I beg your pardon. If 20% of local electors called for a referendum on the hunting ban, then you would have that right. But in practice, we have no plans to actually repeal it.
And would that apply to any issue? 20% of voters called for a referendum on it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we think power back to the people. It's everybody makes decisions in Parliament. Of course, you can lobby your member of Parliament, but sometimes it's she who has the loudest voice that wins. With local direct democracy, local referendum, and everybody gets an equal opportunity.
Okay, let's go back to Daniel, who asked the question in the first place about the rural economy. Daniel, to what extent have the 5 candidates answered your concern?
I think the main point is that consumers will buy by price. It's all very well talking about local artisan producers, and we have a lot of very fine local artisan producers in Shropshire, but generally when you ask a consumer, they will buy by price. So for us to suggest by coming out of the European Union, whereby a farmer's got a whole lot of subsidy and support for their farming to make prices cheaper in the shops, doing that will actually raise prices in the shops, and I think UKIP's policy absolutely sucks.
No, I can just come back on that actually, because that's not true. I think what I actually said, if you watch my lips, was that we would not revoke any subsidies and we would still keep subsidies. In fact, you would get paid more. And going back to consumer price, I was actually joining my North Shropshire colleagues in Market Drayton recently, talking about dairy farmers, and we were leafleting and explaining, you know, that the price of milk was a problem, and every single person we spoke to, and we must have spoken about 200 or 300 people that day, without exception, said they would be prepared to pay more for their milk to support dairy farmers. So I'm sorry you've got such a negative view of the people of Shropshire. I know how positive they are about dairy farming, and I know how much they actually do want to support you.
Okay, we've touched on the question of flooding briefly already, and another question about flooding from Michael Connor. Michael Connor, please. Michael Connor, bring the microphone up.
You say flooding?
Flooding.
Michael Connor. It has been estimated that a flood cost Shrewsbury some £1 million in lost business, notwithstanding increased insurance premiums and lack of other opportunities. We only receive information from the Environment Agency, where, to my knowledge, and having been flooded 10 times since 1998, there's no transparency or scrutiny with the Environment Agency. Would the candidates support the appointment of an independent flood champion for Shrewsbury who would ask and put the right questions to the Environment Agency?
Can I just ask you in what way you feel the Environment Agency is less than transparent? What information are they not giving you that you want?
Well, I mean, for one way, they've not given any answers on the Burnley dam.
Okay, Susan Evans, you get.
Let's start with this EU money issue first, if I may.
Well, actually, Can we start with whether you support? I'm sorry. Can we start with whether you support an independent flood champion for Shrewsbury?
Yes, I'll say it very quickly. But this EU money is not EU money. You know, it is British taxpayers' money that goes to the EU and then comes back to us in the form of these fancy projects and these grants. And every year, bar one, which funnily enough was the year we had a referendum in 1975, we have every year paid out far more than we have ever got back. And at the moment it does vary. We're paying out some 10 billion. So please don't ever let anyone tell you EU money. It isn't. It's your money that's come back to us through a middleman, and we all know how expensive the middleman can be.
This is essentially an environmental issue. What would UKIP's environmental policy? What are UKIP's environmental policies on this?
You didn't interrupt when the others went off at a tangent, so let her have her say.
It's my job.
Okay.
An independent flood champion. I actually think it's a great idea, and it's definitely one that I would want to support. David Cameron, I think, announced a huge package to tackle flooding towards the end of the last year, and unfortunately the proportion that Shrewsbury was given was pretty much insignificant, really, and I don't think we'll go very far to combating flooding, so I think it's a great idea and I support it.
Okay, and well, I've raised the question of climate change. What's the UKIP's position on climate change?
On climate change, well, we will abolish the Climate Change Act because we think it is completely unrealistic. If we were to actually achieve the decarbonisation targets that the Climate Change Act has set for 2050, we would pretty much have to destroy all industry in Britain. And our priority is to cut people's fuel bills. And at the moment, the green levies that again are as a result of this act are pushing up bills by at least £100 a year. And when we've got 7 people dying every minute, according to Age UK, in winter, in harsh winters, and we've got people living in fuel poverty, I think that should come first.
Okay, Malcolm Evans, please. Where's Malcolm Evans?
Hello, Malcolm Evans, Titan Leisure Products. We're a small business based in Shrewsbury. We're developing, we're starting to look at supplying our products around the UK, and we're looking to overseas markets. If you were to exit the EU, what other markets would you be offering or looking to expand on?
Your product is a very specific one, which actually is appears to be related to a German vehicle. Could you tell us a bit more about the product in question?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we manufacture crash-tested seatbed systems for going into camper vans and motorhomes.
Okay, Suzanne Evans, UKIP, in the event of leaving the EU, what would you do to increase exports to non-EU countries?
And for the EU, we've got the whole of the rest of the world to play with. We've never made a trade deal in Britain since 1975. Our seat at the World Trade Organization is vacant. If we took that seat back, we would have far greater markets outside Europe. At the moment, we're running a trade deficit with Europe, but we have greater trade relationships outside, and that's where we want to look. It's very simple. The EU is failing, the Eurozone is failing. You don't need to be in political union with this organisation in order to trade with it. And in fact, I think there are 109 countries who are not in the EU that have business altogether worth, I think it's in the region of 2.3 trillion. So basically, out of the EU and into the world is my motto.
Okay, any more comments on what you've been hearing in response to the last question? Gentleman in the front row there.
Hi there, I'm Ian Mitchell from Hanwood. They keep talking about reform of the EU. So if you didn't get the reform, does that mean you'd vote to come out?
So I have to turn the question around for Suzanne Evans. If you could negotiate reform you were happy with, would you stay in?
Yes, probably. But I don't think that's going to happen. That's the problem. If we could reform the that would be wonderful. But unfortunately, this is an organisation that just won't reform. Daniel and other people on the panel have talked about British influence in the European Union. We don't have any. We did when there were a smaller number of countries and when we had a higher vote share. But the most high vote share we have now on any EU committee is 9%. That's all. Now, I was talking to Nathan Gill, who's a Welsh UKIP MEP over the border, just last night actually, and he said, I go there once a month to Strasbourg, we vote, I press my button, I vote every single time in the best interests of Britain, and all the other members and all the other countries around just vote against Britain's best interests. And unfortunately, when we are so tiny in the European Union, we're never going to get reform. But outside, as I say, Sir Digby Jones, the former chairman of the Confederation of British Industry, actually said that he thought if we left the European Union, we would have a trade deal within 24 hours. We are the 6th largest world economy. We are the 8th largest manufacturing nation. We are not Little England. We are Great Britain. We are more than capable of standing on our own 2 feet.
Okay, and a final question. During the show on BBC Radio Shropshire this morning, it says, could you ask if the candidates think social media is a good platform with which to engage with constituents? This is from someone who alleges that one of you on the panel has blocked you on one of the various social media platforms. But let's start with Suzanne and work the other way. I think social media a good way of engaging with potential constituents?
Yeah, I do, absolutely, and I'm a great believer in social media and I use it a lot. I think the problem with it is that sometimes in politics it can get very nasty, and I think as much as you can engage with constituents, unfortunately there are also people out there from other political parties who just want to hate you continually. And I've had some very upsetting things said about me on social media, but you just have to move on with that. You're in the public eye. I think you have to expect to take a bit of flack. But yes, I'm a great believer in social media, and I think it's extremely useful.
What makes each of you believe that you would be the best candidate to be our MP? In 30 seconds. And Suzanne Evans, what makes you believe you're the best candidate to be our MP?
Well, I'm passionate about Shrewsbury, I'm passionate about Britain, and I'm passionate about people. I've had some political experience, but also a huge amount of life experience and practical experience outside politics. I have a can-do attitude, and I know how to get things done. I also think it's time Westminster was shaken up. I think that cosy clique in Westminster needs rattling and shaking and changing, and UKIP MPs in the House of Parliament really will be the voice of opposition in the next Parliament. But the most important thing, I think, is that for all UKIP members of Parliament, it will be you who is the boss. We don't answer to party whips, we don't even answer to party leaders, we answer to our constituents. So if you want an MP who really works for you, you need to vote for me.
With that, we bring the evening to an end. Thank you very much for your attendance here this evening, and would you please show your appreciation for the 5 declared candidates. Shrewsbury Business Chamber, on behalf of BBC Radio Shropshire, on behalf of Shrewsbury College, thank you very much for coming along this evening. Have a safe journey home.